Welcome everybody. We're looking at the Tascam mystery mixer, and why don't we just take a little tour of this mixer. It's got 12 channels, and we've got one VU meter for each channel, and we also have VU meters for the master bus. Those meters are source selectable between the input, the bus, or whatever has been selected as the source for the monitor bus. So that's pretty handy. And the meters, so we got channels 1 through 12 or buses 1 through 8, and you can also source the aux buses, but I'm not quite sure how that works yet. And then each channel strip is just chock full of stuff, some of which I have not figured out yet. So I talked about the meter source select. The input is source selectable between the mic jack or line 1 or line 2. You've got a bus master knob, and not sure yet, though it has been suggested that because it's an 8 bus mixer but each of the 12 channels has a bus master knob on it, that the output jack on the back for the bus is only active on channel strips 1 through 8 for those 8 buses. Each channel has phantom power, phase reverse, and a 30 dB pad, individual assign switches for buses 1 through 8, as well as a program mute, which is handy. The other nice thing is that with your 3 input sources, you have 3 trim knobs. You have your mic trim knob, and then you have a line 1 trim and a line 2 trim on a stacked pot. And then of course you got your pan knob for your bus assign. And then we move next into the equalizer section. Each of the 12 channels has a switch to route the EQ to the monitor bus, so you can monitor EQ but route your signal dry but monitor EQ changes. You have a low pass, a 12.5 kilohertz low pass filter, a 160 hertz high pass, or a 50 hertz high pass filter, and then of course we've got a bypass switch to take the EQ out of the loop. And then the EQ section itself is 4-band, swept high and swept low, and I don't know yet if that's shelving or semi-parametric, but it kind of reminds me of the equalizer section on a PE40, which has peaking filters for all 4 bands. So at this point I'm making the assumption that the high and low bands are peaking semi-parametric. The 2 mid bands are parametric with individual cut boost, and then Q controls and frequency controls. The aux section is much like the M512 or 520. Individually selectable pre-post fader in stereo groups. And then the source for each pair of aux buses is either the input that's been selected up here, or the monitor bus, so you can set up a monitor, and then that goes straight to the master section, and there's a number of options there. But then you can further send that in a QMix or other things to multiple outputs. Or the source is line 2, which is designed to be your tape returns, and then each pair has a mute switch. And then of course you've got your level and pan controls for each pair of auxes on oh, that's interesting. That's funny. Look at that. You got aux 1, 2 here, and then you've got a stacked control for pan or level. But then down here on aux 3, 4, you've got level controls for aux 3 or aux 4. So, So aux 1, 2 may be designed as a stereo aux bus, and aux 3, 4 designed as 2 individual aux buses. And then we get down here to the monitor section, which is pretty rich as well. You've got, I can't remember what you call them, but these type of controls where you push one and then, I guess just radio button type controls for your source for the monitor bus, which is either the input, again, as selected up here at the top of the strip, or line 1, or line 2, or the program bus. Now, here's where things get interesting for me, because I have no idea what this does. There is a button here titled Remote, has its own LED indicator, and it's a latching switch, so you can source the remote bus, I guess it would be, into your monitor section. And down here by the fader, you have a remote section, either remote A, remote B, and then a switch to latch that in, to punch that in. So I'm assuming that whatever is selected here, and if it is enabled, then you can source it here at the monitor bus. The only problem is that I haven't found any input jacks or anything, or output, for a remote bus, so I haven't figured that out yet. Then you've got a pan knob for the stereo bus. So that's nice. Unlike the M512 and 520 mixers, which do not have a direct route to a true stereo bus, this mixer does. So you can assign to your 8 program groups, but the channel also goes to the stereo bus. And then as far as solos and mutes, this has been really dizzying for me so far. You can, oh, and I forgot to mention up here in the monitor section, you can, that can either be in mono or stereo. And then of course it's a stereo monitor bus, so you've got a level and pan knob there. And then in the solo and mute section, you can, if you wish, just mute it to the stereo bus, or you're going to solo the monitor bus, and I'm not quite sure how this works yet because there's a line indicating, so I'm assuming that you can solo it at the monitor bus or at the stereo bus, or you can solo whatever you have selected up here on your bus assigned, but then you also have a program mute, or not mute, or solo, I don't know. It's one of those things that's going to have to be figured out. And then you also have a pre-fader listen. So obviously you are soloing it just, I'm assuming, just aft of the trim control for whatever input source you have selected. You also can individually mute the monitor bus. So you've got all the, and then you've got an overall channel mute, the big orange button. So you have individual mute controls for your EQ section, a bypass switch, individual mute controls for your aux buses in pairs, a program mute, monitor mute, and muting it to the stereo bus. So you can pretty much cap this thing off at just about any place you need to or want to. So, and then again, I talked about the remote section earlier, and then you've got a long throw fader. Over here in the master section, and there's parts of this I haven't figured out yet, but you've got a test tone generator on board. It's switch selectable as off, 64 Hertz, 400 Hertz, 1 kilohertz, 6.4 kilohertz, or 12 kilohertz, which is pretty nice. Cover a lot of things you need to do when setting up your reel-to-reel recorder. There are two RIAA phono preamps on board with individual level controls, and you can bring them both in. I'm assuming these route straight to the master fader, so you can bring those in, and they've got their own level controls. Obviously I'm missing one of those, be pulling that from parts. You have what they call echo returns, but these are just basically effects returns. They have jacks on the back, and then those can be routed to either program buses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or direct to the stereo bus, or all at the same time. You can route your effects return to your monitor mix, and then you can also solo your effect return. And then each effect return has its stereo effect return has its own level and pan knob, so that's pretty nice. Back over here to the test tone generator, that also has a it's either at -10 or -20, and then you can assign that to all program buses with a slate latching slate switch. The built-in talkback microphone, you have, and this is really cool, you have individual level knobs for patching that talkback mic into the program bus. So like a talkback slate, the aux 1, 2 buses, the aux 3, 4 buses, or the studio out. And I'm going to hop over to that for a second. Over here you have source select switch racks for the studio out jacks and the control room out jacks, and you can source the stereo bus, monitor bus, or there are external jacks. There's a, let's see, I think it's a pair of RCA jacks on the back, so you can direct patch any external source straight to the studio outs, or external to, or you can dump the whatever sourced at the control room switch rack straight over to the studio rack to duplicate that. Same over here in the control room, source select switch rack, stereo, monitor bus, external 1, external 2, and I like this. You can switch that to mono. There is a dim switch to drop the level, and then there's also a mute switch, and then you've got your master level control, so you can set a good level that you want. Then you can either quiet it down, or you can just altogether mute your control room out, so as you're talking with your talent or whatever. And then I haven't figured these sections out. Group input A, group input B, and monitor. Haven't figured those out yet. But you can see what's there. There's a master talkback enable. Let's see, talkback level. Right, okay, so you can set your levels up here, and then this is where you drop that in. And again, these are on non-latching switches, as they should be. So this is really great. So you have individual level controls that you can set up for those 4 separate sets of outputs. And then you can individually drop those in as needed. So a lot more flexibility on some of these things in the M500 series. And then last but not least, almost last but not least, again, a long throw fader, overload LEDs, as well as peak LEDs. All of the meters have peak LEDs. And then the master meter, you can either, and these, either you're monitoring the stereo bus with that, or by the push of a button you can be looking at your monitor bus. Your headphone mix for the engineer is either sourcing the control room or the studio, which is handy because as you set up your individual sources and levels for those 2 sets of stereo buses, you can quickly switch over to hear what the talent is hearing in the studio on playback or whatever. And then you've got a headphone level knob. I haven't even found the headphone jack. That's weird. Where is it? Okay. And then you've got a solo master, and remember, here's all the things you can solo, and your echo returns, but you've got a master for that, and then here's your monitor master switch. So mostly got it figured out, but definitely some areas to explore. And then on the back, each of the 12 channels has individual insert, send, receive jacks on RCAs. You've got a fold back jack, and then a pre-fade out. And then you've got a direct input to the bus. I'm assuming those are the program buses, and I haven't figured that one out yet. And then your bus out level, there's a bus out jack right there, right below the bus input. That's either +4 or -10 unbalanced, so that's nice. Switch selectable right there. Then you have an aux out, which is parallel with the bus out. So you got 2 sets of outs for your program bus. And then here's your line 1 input, line 2 input, and then of course your microphone input. So each channel strip has that. And obviously I can't quite get down to the master section, so I may cover that later. And there's some pictures in the original post about this board called 12-track old school mixer or mixing board, started by Shoulder Pain. So that is a tour of the basic controls and the exterior stuff on this mixer.